Coming up next in This Week in Computer Hardware, Windows 8 is here, and so is the iPad mini. Is Monoprice going to deliver 27-inch cat leaf-style monitors from Korea? New drivers from AMD, Piledriver beats Bulldozer. All that and more coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 192, recorded October 25th, 2012. Every inch in iPad. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the most important, most exciting, and most useful news and answers to your questions about computer hardware and a little bit of the whole tablet thing, too. I'm Patrick Norton, joined as always by the inimitable Ryan Shrout. Ryan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I have to tell you, I feel a little bit better than I thought I would this week with all of the Windows 8 stuff, the hardware releases that I knew were coming up. I'm thinking maybe I'm just in a daze still, and then like tomorrow it'll all come crashing down officially on the Windows 8 launch. But
why would you feel overwhelmed by Windows 8, Surface, the iPad Mini, MacBook Pros, the iPad secretly getting a new CPU, the invention of the Fusion Drive, which is a marketing campaign at its finest, new driver betas from AMD, new card bundles from AMD, Piledriver, the Bulldozer as it should have been, and a whole stack of relatively relaxed, regular news. I mean,
yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine why at all. Right?
There's not a single GPU in the mix, dude.
Well. Hold on. Let me check the show notes. Let me check the show. No, you are correct.
APUs, which are similar to GPUs, but totally different.
Right.
Well, okay. Let's keep it simple. Windows 8 is here. Someday I will get my free update code from Microsoft so I can download Windows Media Center, which is not included in Windows 8. You probably don't care about that. If you're looking for a Surface tablet or a Windows 8-powered tablet, remember, kids, RT is the ARM Linux version and will only run software from the Windows 8 store. The regular Core i whatever-powered Windows 8 tablets and laptops. I mean, we've seen some interesting stuff from obviously, Lenovo comes to mind, and some of the other major vendors. If it's got an Intel or an AMD processor in there, it's going to be able to run Windows 8. All of your old applications. We actually pretty much spent the whole show yesterday on Tekzilla talking about, amongst other things, how to use Classic Shell to get you a start button if you find yourself profoundly frustrated by the Metro environment.
Nice.
But, of course, like 48 hours before the release of Windows 8, Apple just couldn't contain themselves.
It's not an accident, obviously, right?
No, especially because, obviously the Surface event was this week also. But, the long-anticipated, rumored, oh, my goodness, they're building it, they're not building it, iPad mini shows up. And essentially, it's a second-generation iPad, only smaller, 7.9-inch screen. I want to say 163 pixels per inch. Here it is, 1024 by 768 resolution, 7.9-inch screen, dual-core A5 processor, which is pretty awesome. 5-megapixel photos, that's okay. 1080p HD video recording, that's pretty awesome. And, basically it's a small second-generation iPad. What they didn't talk about too much, but some online pundits went on for thousands of words being all cranky about, was the iPad with Retina display, which is apparently what we're supposed to call the iPad 3 now, coming out basically out of nowhere, the dual-core A6X with quad-core graphics, which, if you believe Apple and their benchmarks, is delivering you something like double the performance. So it's exciting.
So on the iPad Mini, I don't really have anything specifically to say about it other than they did a lot of comparisons to the Nexus 7, on stage, talking about the screen real estate and how theirs was bigger, less bezel on it than you get with the Nexus 7. But it's also like 65% cheaper or something like that, or 45% cheaper as well. So, I mean, you're talking about the iPad Mini is going to be $329.
Right.
Nexus 7 is $199, or at least it will be again when it gets back in stock. I actually think they're going to upgrade the capacity on it for that.
Pardon me.
But yeah, interesting hardware, but nothing wildly new and exciting. It's a small iPad.
Cue the Android versus iOS fanboy arguments. Well, of course, the iPad Mini is more expensive than the $200, Nexus or Android, Nexus or Amazon tablets. It's got 100% more awesome-y, Apple-y goodness. I mean, look, there's a lot of great tablets available. Mm-hmm. If you want a less expensive tablet, go with Android. If you're willing to pony up for the entry-level 16-gigabyte Wi-Fi, no 3G, no GPS version of the iPad Mini, you're dropping $329. Boom.
I just think we talked about this internally here yesterday. Didn't write anything about it, but have you ever known a company that's so good at just going against everything they said previously and nobody caring? Remember the statements that their former CEO made about nobody wants a tablet smaller than 10 inches. It's never going to work. And then here they are releasing a product doing exactly that. And they opened up at their press conference of, this is not just a small iPad. And then I'm pretty sure it's just a small iPad.
What am I going to tell you, dude? It's Apple. Apple is 100% about executing the maximization of their sales of the current models as available, and it's their job to protect the shareholders' investments.
Yeah.
Someone might say lying through their teeth. Someone else might say practicing excellent. Sort of security around developing products. It is what it is. I mean, what kind of blows my mind is we're all kind of expecting the next generation iPad March of next year, and suddenly out of nowhere, just a few months after the iPad, the iPad 3, we get the iPad 4. Of course, the only real difference is the new A6X chip. And I really want to know why all of a sudden did they yank this chip out? Is it because they want to stay ahead of some of the new products coming on the Android tablets or the Surface tablets, or did they have issues? They did a die shrink, I believe, for the A6X. Did they have yield issues at the launch of the iPad 3 or the iPad with Retina display?
Right.
It's interesting, and I can't remember what your upgrade options were if you bought an iPad in the last.
I think it was
months.
only if you'd bought it within the last 30 days that they would let you return it, type of thing. But
sounds
there was
about
something
right,
else interesting that they talked about at the press conference, and you alluded to it in the intro: the Fusion Drive stuff.
Yeah. So should we talk about the MacBook Pros, or should we go straight to the Fusion
that's fine.
Drive?
Yeah, I mean, real quick, about I know you mentioned the lack of optical drives, but we're also getting a Retina display on a 13.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. It's interesting that they basically the biggest thing for me is okay, the optical drive's dead, FireWire's dead, which is a big deal if you have a bunch of money tied up in FireWire drives or cameras. Maybe not so much for anybody else out there. What did you think of the specs on them? I mean, because the construction is really interesting. They've got the big speaker enclosures inside of there, and the pricing, topping out at 2.6 gigahertz quad core i7s.
We're talking about the iMacs?
No, the MacBook Pros.
Oh, okay.
With Retina display. It kind of bummed me out because I was they're still maxing out at 8 gigabytes of memory.
Right.
That I found a little frustrating.
I didn't find anything particularly interesting about the MacBooks, the Retina, the 13-inch MacBook, the 13-inch.
Not the dual
Retina
mics and the USB 3.0.
Yes, I didn't. But the Retina 13-inch is cool. It's still too expensive for my taste. Or a little bit less expensive, I might consider it as a laptop. The new iMacs were really cool looking, I think, and it's interesting. It seems like they've gone back to using mobile hardware in it instead of desktop hardware. So that's how they're able to constrict the space on the body design.
Yeah, the thinness of the new iMac is pretty crazy. And then, actually, Alan did a pretty good write-up on it on a quick look at Apple's Fusion Drive.
Right.
Apple mentioned a new brackets, or I should say parentheses, Alan Malventano's, not mine, built-in OS 10, 10.8.2 and up, dubbed Fusion Drive. This tech enables the late 2012 Mac Mini and iMac models to have a pseudo-hybrid drive. Of course, hybrid drive, we've talked about this lots on the show. It's not an SSD. It's not a traditional hard drive. It's basically a traditional hard drive with a whole bunch of RAM on it to allow the drive to cache data that's commonly accessed, like your boot up data, your favorite applications, and is going to make those things behave like they're running off of an SSD drive. Alan wants to make it abundantly clear, it's not a hybrid drive.
Well, what's interesting about it, sorry to interrupt, is I think Alan came away more impressed with it than unimpressed with it, because he actually likes this model of how they're doing it. Apparently, it's not new. It's something that the enterprise has been doing for a while. But you have two separate drives. It appears as one partition to the user and to the operating system. No, really just to the user, like a hybrid drive would. But the operating system kind of in the background decides and manages which data to keep on the SSD and which data to keep on the hard drive. And it has some kind of learning algorithm that says, okay, he uses these applications a lot. He uses these data files a lot. Let's copy those over to the SSD. You're not actually, Alan wanted to point out last night that you're not mirroring any data. So you're not wasting any space.
Right.
If you got 120 gig SSD and a 1 terabyte drive, you have 1.1 whatever terabytes of storage. And we always recommend, like when we're doing system recommendations for people, is to have an SSD and then a hard drive for your data and storage. And the intent of the Fusion drive is to do that same process, but kind of take over for the user, so you don't have to do things like managing which folders go into which things, being able to use what are those called, links, the dynamic links between folders we talked about last week or the week before, of moving your Steam folders and that kind of stuff. It's supposed to be able to do that on its own. I have doubts about, is Apple going to provide options where I can say, this application and all associated data files, I always want on the SSD. Even if I haven't used it in 3 months, I want that to be there when I need it, like that kind of thing. And that's not typically what Apple wants to do, is to provide that kind of customization. So I think it's an interesting design, and they're basically taking what is an enterprise idea and technology and bringing it to a consumer. Nobody else really does this. If you buy a Corsair accelerator SSD or you use Intel's SRT technology, you are, or even the hybrid drives, you are duplicating data, and you have either no control over what goes on the SSD, or you have too much control and you can't really, you have to do all the micromanaging type of thing. So
you're doomed.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see, and I'd be curious if I'd be surprised if we don't see some version of a Windows software that will do this type of thing, where it's basically what like a Corsair accelerator drive does with its included software, but it attempts to learn on the fly as opposed to, just randomly type thing. So I don't know.
It's exciting. It's I don't know. It's funny to watch like all these different variations on how we're going to pair up flash memory and hard drives. It's exciting. Anyhow, Al Malventano, OpenPCPro.com is full write-up if you want to check it out. AMD never settled 12.11 beta driver performance testing. Mr. Shrout, what did you find?
So 12.11 driver beta is actually out and available now. When I wrote the article, it wasn't. And it promises as much as 20% performance increase in some games, most notably Battlefield 3 and the new Medal of Honor that just came out this week. They're both based off the Frostbite 2 engine. And it actually delivered on those performance levels. The new driver increased performance at all resolutions in Battlefield 3. It increased performance in Batman Arkham City. It increased performance in Dirt 3. 3D Mark 11, that's not really as important. Not a whole lot in Skyrim, not a whole lot in Metro, that type of stuff. But it did offer some significant improvements. Where it did offer performance improvements, it offered significant amounts of it. And what's interesting, maybe controversial about it, is a lot of people, when you see this, you're going to have a lot of questions. Like, how did you suddenly find 15 or 20% additional performance out of your GPU? And you might be likely to remember back in the days where they would do shader replacements, where they were basically cheating. They were searching for specific executable files and replacing shaders that they knew they could do shortcuts on. Like I don't know if you remember, Patrick, the Quake Quack issue. So if you renamed Quake.exe to Quack.exe, the performance would drop. Even though in theory that shouldn't happen because the GPU is just handling DirectX calls the same way. Right. But the driver was specifically, because that game was so popular and using so many benchmarks, ATI at the time got in trouble for specifically looking for that and like tweaking things behind the scenes. And this has been tested. You know, you can rename Battlefield 3's executable, you can rename 3D Mark 11, and they're not doing that same type of stuff. So
that's good.
Yeah, it is.
Everybody's learned from the past. But I mean, it was a problem in the past. Especially with certain synthetic benchmarks where, you know, GPU vendors and certain PC vendors back when there were like 19 major PC vendors would do some really nefarious things, some of which may not have been outright cheating, but were certainly the sort of tuning that was probably unlikely to have in the PC you would get at home or involve things like, you know, not rendering whole segments of a page because the benchmark didn't pay attention to it or stuff like that. My goodness, it's 70 frames per second. No, it's not. What's the deal with the Never Settle bundle that's coming with the new Radeon GPUs?
So the bundle is kind of the second part of this campaign they launched this week. One is the driver claiming that, hey, look, people rag on AMD for their drivers a lot of times. Look, we're doing a lot of work here. We're working with game developers. We are investing in the infrastructure needed for that kind of stuff. They also started a new game bundle for video cards for now through the holiday season. And it's actually pretty impressive when you see how much stuff you actually get. If you buy an HD 7900 series card, so 7950 or 7970, you get Far Cry 3 for free. You get Hitman Absolution for free. You get Sleeping Dogs for free. And you get a 20% off offer on the new Medal of Honor game. And that's pretty impressive. So you're talking about, you can get a 7950 for $299 today. And you're talking about you're getting 3 full PC titles, you know, $50 a piece.
Right.
And 20% off Medal of Honor, which is worth probably $10-15 as well, right? So
that's pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome. You're talking about, if you go with the best case scenario, it's about $170 in game bundle add-on to your 7900 series card. It's a little bit less if you buy a 7800 series card. You get Medal of Honor discount and Far Cry 3. If you buy 2 7800s, you get Far Cry 3, Hitman, and the 20% off with Medal of Honor. So, you know, it kind of varies based on how much money you're spending. If you go to PCPro.com and you look at our never settle post, you'll see like the matrix of what you can get based on what you buy, and it's highly aggressive. You know, they are kind of competing. Borderlands 2 pack-in with NVIDIA was very successful, very popular game. Far Cry 3 is going to be a very popular game, and that is the one game that comes with everything. Even if you buy an HD 7770 gigahertz edition card, you're going to get a free copy of Far Cry 3 and 20% off Medal of Honor. So it's a pretty big push, and it's just, you know, we've talked about it. AMD has financial issues. They have they're losing 15% of their workforce, cuts starting today, and they're like, we need to get some excitement back in the company, and it's hard to do it on the CPU side of things. So they're going where they can with the GPU side of things, and they have good products. They're very competitive on the pricing side, and now with these pack-ins, I think if you're a gamer and you're like, do I get a 660 or a 660 Ti, or do I get a 7870 or 7950? Now you have other things to consider. Not that you didn't have enough data points to.
Not that it wasn't complicated enough. Well, who's actually paying for these games? Is this essentially AMD subsidizing the cost of the games?
Yeah, pretty much. So what happens is they get a really good discount from the publisher, but then they are definitely, you know, subsidizing part of that. And it may be something where with their board partners they split the cost, that type of thing. But at the end, they're not paying $170 for these discounts. You know, they're probably paying $50 for these. For a game developer, somebody like Sleeping Dogs, it's a good way to get your brand out there, and you have the game going into a couple of million people's hands, right, over the next several months or whatever it happens to be. And it's, you know, they look at it as good partnerships and marketing both ways.
It's a good thing. Sleeping. I know a bunch of people that love sleeping dogs.
Yeah. And I got to play some Far Cry 3 this past weekend, and it was pretty awesome. It was impressive looking.
All you need to do is get that AC 7900. Oh, my goodness. Which would be worth half as much as my computer right now. Bashir breaks cover, AMD FX 8350 and FX 6300. Josh over at PCPro.com writing it up. Bulldozer is the word. Okay, perhaps it is not the word, writes Josh, but it is a word. When AMD let that little code name slip some years back, AMD enthusiasts and tech journalists started to salivate about the possibilities. So Bulldozer didn't really reach anybody's expectations, and enter in, should we call it Vashira? Should we call it Piledriver? And what's the primary differences? I guess Piledriver is the code name for the architecture behind Vashira. Right. That's what Josh writes. You know, Piledriver sort of hits the street in the Trinity APUs, and this is basically AMD's trying to make Piledriver the best it can be. The cruelest thing I think I've heard is that Piledriver is basically what Bulldozer should have been. So does that mean AMD is a year behind where we would have liked them to have been when they started this?
They're further behind than that, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, Piledriver still it's a decent part. If you read Josh's review, he goes through all the benchmarks. It's a little bit better in single threaded. It's a little bit more better and multi-threaded stuff, but it's still not keeping up with the highest end parts, and that's always reflected in the pricing. Unless the company is crazy, it's always reflected in the pricing. So the new high end part is the 8350, and it's going to sell for $195, maybe a little bit less. And so a sub $200 flagship part from AMD on the consumer side kind of gives you an idea that it's where it's going to perform, right? So they pit it against the Core i5 3570, which is a quad-core 4-threaded part, and it competes very, very well against those parts. And you can see if you go down the line, Josh tested both the 8350 and the FX 6300, and they both did okay. Applications that are heavily threaded, in particular like video transcoding, seem to like the Bulldozer / Piledriver architecture a little bit more. Okay. But when you get into gaming, it's good, but it's not great. It's able to keep up with those similarly priced parts, but it's not breaking barriers. It still runs hot. We're talking about the FX 8350 is 130 or 125 TDP, 125 watt TDP on it, right? The 3570 and the 3770 are 77 watt TDP. So it's a lot more power. It's a lot more heat. For the enthusiast user, for the gamer, that kind of stuff, it probably doesn't matter a whole lot. You know, if you're building a single PC and all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting to think about, right? So if Intel wanted to, they have a lot more thermal headroom in their design probably to run clock speeds up. But AMD does not have that thermal headroom. They're running at 4 gigahertz, which is nice, but they're at 130 watts.
130 watts, but one of the things that Josh points out is that, or Josh points out that AMD claims is most of these processors should easily hit 5 gigahertz if you put a serious cooling, you know, either water cooling or a high-end, a quality air cooling system on it, which I thought was kind of interesting when you're looking at the you know, the percentage of performance increase from stock to 5 gigahertz. Right. You know, looking at the AMD FX 4300, 6300, and 8350, the graphs are a little kind of all over the place, but it's interesting, the idea that you could get a healthy bump in performance, or at least that the parts are receptive to overclocking, for lack of a better description.
I wish both, you know, I really do wish, because of the whole idea of competition, right? We see it in the GPU space, and it's very important. I wish I could say that AMD was better than Intel in these number of areas, so you should buy it. But it's really hard to do that. Instead, it's more of it's competent and it's fine if you're the kind of person that likes AMD parts, you like supporting the underdog, you just have had good experience with their platforms. We have no qualms about not saying go for it, right? But if I were going to build myself a new system tomorrow, which I am, you know, I'm not building it based off of an FX 8350. I'll be building it off of an Ivy Bridge part, and I don't want that to be the case necessarily, but there you go.
It is what it is. And I should point out, Josh makes it very clear in his testing that you are going to need some fairly healthy water cooling. Any kind of stock air cooler that ships with the APU or CPU or whatever we want to call these is not going to do the job to get it up to 5 gigahertz, at least in his testing. So let me make myself clear. You're going to need all the cooling to make that run. Speaking of which, Corsair's updated the Hydro Series 860, and they have a new Series H55. The 855, excuse me, the H55. It's an update to the hugely respected, and I believe I'm quoting directly from the press release here, the hugely respected Hydro Series H50, and is based on the latest 4th generation cold plate design. The updated version of the Hydro Series H60 takes advantage of the latest cold plate, manifold, and fan technology to further increase performance and reduce noise levels. So basically, a cold plate is the part that attaches the cooling system to your CPU. Basically, it's what we kind of have gotten used to from Corsair, where there's a nice fan, some decent, simple to run tubing, and I guess we're going to call it cooling plate now that attaches to your CPU. $79.99 for the 860 available now. H55 is $70. Basically, $80 for the 860, $70 for the H55. Both available now. The 860 is running a 120 millimeter fan. And it is, quote, a new magnetic mounting bracket, which makes it simple to select the correct motherboard socket format. And rubber tubing. I like the idea that they're doing rubber tubing, so you don't have that big cronky tubing to bend.
The plastic part,
of your system. Yeah, that always makes me a little uptight. But new stuff from Corsair, and I look forward to seeing how those work in the field with the real-world testing. And by the way, if you're building a case or building a system, check out the new Corsair Carbide 200R. It's selling for $80 up on Newegg, and it's a very, very good-looking, very subtle, actually. I like the fact that we're getting lots and lots of good-looking cases with decent storage that don't have giant windows on the side. I am so over the giant windows. So
yeah, I'm not usually. I don't keep my system that clean, so I prefer nobody see it.
Yeah, cable management has never been my strong point, but you've got a decent amount of 2.5 inch and 5.25 inch, 3.5 inch drive storage inside of it. Nice clean layout, decent cable wiring options. It'd be nice if it had a filter on the top too, but I'd also like a pony. And USB 3.0 ports built into the case.
And they're selling it for $79 on Newegg, but I think you should expect that to come down to like $69 or $59 fairly soon. And it's just really cool to see a company where when we first started hearing about Corsair cases, we talked about the 800D a long time ago, and it was like a $400 case when it originally came out. And we've seen them slowly over time kind of release cheaper and cheaper models while still retaining a lot of the really cool features that made them famous in the first place.
What's the story on the new Asus routers? They holding up?
Well, I'm using it right now for this internet connection, so it must be doing okay. We just started doing networking reviews at PC Part. This is our first kind of big, massive article, and it took a long time. Chris Barbary is our new networking guy, and we as you learned, we're basically creating our processes as we go, and we used basically the Asus RT N66U. Yes, that thing right there. I think what was that? What was the code name for that? The Dark Knight. Yeah, I was going to say the Batman, but it's the Dark Knight. And it actually is a great router. It's got, my favorite part about it is the firmware, like the interface for it is unlike any other router I've ever used. It's very user friendly, has cool stuff like bandwidth monitoring, lots of guest network support. You can hook up a USB drive to it or a USB hard drive and have cloud storage that you can access from your phone and applications and all kinds of different places. It has a whole lot of cool features on it. It also performs really well. We compared it to the Apple router. We used lots of different adapters like the USB N66 and N53 from Asus, kind of get this whole massive amounts of data. So I really like the router. Chris really liked the router. It got a gold reward from us. It's a little bit on the high side, $160, $170 or something like that. But for dual band, 3x3 router that's probably right in the range of where it should be. So I encourage everybody to go to PCPro.com and read that story, because we want feedback not just on those particular products, but on the process that we're using for the benchmarking and the testing and the evaluation and that kind of stuff. So feedback is welcome.
I always like seeing external antennas on a router, because they're getting less and less common these days, and they can make a huge difference in kind of tuning the router to get the best performance inside of your house.
Yep.
So we had one more, actually two more stories before we go. We want to talk about the Asus Vivo Tab RT. That's coming up next soon on PC Per.
Yeah, so
it's
we
essentially
did
the tablet / keyboard.
Yeah, so this is the tablet here. You can see it's I've spent a couple of days with it. So far, so good. We've had one kind of hardware issue with it that we're getting a new firmware tonight to hopefully address. But this is a Tegra 3 based Windows RT tablet, and it's very interesting to see how this is going to work. We haven't done a full review on it yet. We're working on that. We did like a live kind of unboxing, preview, initial impressions type of thing. And the big problem, the hold up for testing it, in my opinion, is that the amount of applications that you have access to is still pretty minimal.
Right.
So we're waiting for that, because it's hard. Well, it's a whole new platform, so it's hard to look at it on its own.
In theory, anything that shows up in the Windows Store should be available on Windows RT. So the
Right.
number of applications have grown radically even in the last couple of weeks. So that's a good thing. But
even in the last couple of days, when I got it on Tuesday, there was almost nothing in the store. And now if you go to the store, you can get Netflix and Hulu and Skype and iHeartRadio and the New York Times and that kind of stuff. So what's cool about if you're familiar with the Transformer series, you get like a 10-inch tablet. It's well made. It's a little bit. It's not a really good one-handed use device because it's very wide across it. But I think the main selling point for this kind of tablet is the keyboard dock. Right here, put this in the camera shot. And what you get is when you combine these devices, you get a much longer battery life. So you go from like 8 hours to like 14 and a half hours of media playback time. And now all of a sudden you've got a somewhat usable notebook. You've got a trackpad, you've got a full keyboard, small keys, but a keyboard nonetheless, extended battery life, you close it up and, away you go. And now, while I was a fan of the Transformer series, which was the Android-based one that we've talked about on here, this comes with Windows or Office 2013 RT version, right? So you can do a little bit more productivity. But it really comes down to what kind of apps are going to ship for it, right? And whether or not you want to take advantage of that. We've got this. I'm still trying to find a Surface. I didn't pre-order one, and we don't have a Microsoft Store open near us. Ironically, the Microsoft Store opens on November the 8th. So talk about poor timing on that. But trying to find a Surface to kind of compare it to, because if it's the only one of its kind right now, at least according that I've had hands-on time with, in terms of a Windows RT tablet, an ARM-based Windows tablet.
So it's average so far in terms of Windows RT performance.
But I think the real battle for these devices is going to be: are you going to want to buy an ARM-based Windows RT tablet, or are you going to want to get like the Intel Clover Trail version of the tablet, which will have access to all of your x86 applications? I'm still trying to figure out and kind of solidify what is the benefit of Windows RT over Windows 8 on a Clover Trail-based setup. Right. So is it going to be price? Is it going to be battery life? What's it going to be? Yeah.
In theory, it should be battery life. In theory, it should be price. But I still see RT as being something that's going to maybe flounder in the consumer space and have success in verticals for kind of traditional
$599 with
verticals.
The keyboard dock. Right. So that's your price for this whole combo is 32 gig model with the docks.
Okay. I mean,
I haven't decided yet. It's tough.
It's competitive with the iPads, and you get a keyboard.
And the Surface. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
tough. It's tough for me. I think I need to wait on the software. I think that's the key for me.
And one last thing before we go, we love the 27-inch inexpensive Korean available on eBay monitors. We've talked about them. We've talked to viewers who've bought them. We've talked to friends who've bought them. Most people seem to be having a lot of good luck with them. Basically, high-resolution monitors for like a third of what we've seen them for compared to like a major monitor manufacturer. And apparently, says Macworld, or Monoprice basically called up Macworld and said they will be, quote, introducing a line of high-end LED displays with screen quality designed to compete with Apple's $999 Cinema display, 27-inch in-plane switching IPS WQHD display with a 16:9 aspect ratio, a 2560 by 1440 pixels, 1,000 contrast ratio, maximum brightness of 380 candles per meter squared, 6 millisecond per response time. Basically, at this point, we're in this sort of standard IPS specs. And a 72% color gamut. Basically, something very similar to the Cinema displays or pretty much any of the 27-inch 2560 by 1440 or the WQHD panels are going to have fairly high-end specs. But dual-link DVI tilt stand, basic wall mount capability, built-in speakers, and a glossy black plastic enclosure. Sadly, they have not announced a price or a ship date yet, but we wonder if that is going to be the cat leap. Monoprice is bringing the cat leap to the States. So
yeah, both the important facts we need.
The number one and number two facts. Twitch, TWiCH at twit.tv is the email address. Feel free to send us questions or, well, you know what, send us questions. We love your questions or comments or suggestions. twit.tv/twitch is where you can subscribe to the show and find out more about what we're doing. We should fire up a couple emails before we go. There's been a lot of news today, so we've been news heavy. Oh.
My face is
locked
frozen
up again.
Burke, do we know whose side this is on? Is this on our side, or is it on Skype's side?
Let me just try to call you back real quick.
Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
But yeah, it's probably on your side, Ryan.
In the last few minutes.
And I'm in the chat room. Wow, that was a wonderful picture, Ryan.
It was a wonderful photo.
Don't be cruel, Crimson Ghost.
Okay, just waiting for the... okay, let's see here. Go away. And continue.
Please ask Ryan to make sure nothing is backing up. That's funny. In 3, 2, Twitch at twit.tv is the email address if you want to send us a question or ask us about a piece. Basically, we love questions. Hardware questions, please. Twit.tv/twitch, TWiCH, is the place to find the podcast. If you're new to the podcast, trying to figure out how to subscribe, you can get all the podcasts there or just search for Twitch inside of your favorite podcast, or whether it's iTunes or something else. We got an email. Get a little bit of time for emails tonight because it's a news-heavy day, or week. Yeah. But Eric's got a question about using an SSD in a system with a cache SSD. Says, hey, Patrick. Hi, Ryan. I use an OCZ Vertex 4 solid-state drive as my primary drive and a 2 terabyte Western Digital hard disk drive for my storage. I was wondering if it is possible to install a caching SSD to cache my hard disk drive. I've read that it can cause some problems if you try to do that. If you already have an SSD installed, I would love to hear your opinions and keep doing the great show. Well, thank you, Eric. Eric basically wants to create his own personal fusion drive.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of research on this, and I kind of asked Alan, and the general answer was it's probably not a great idea. Logically, it seems like it makes sense. Like, it should just be something you do, right? When you set up Intel SRT, I think that's what it's called, or whatever software you're going to use or implementation of caching, you basically create an array with those two products, and that should be separate from whatever the SSD is. When it comes to, if Alan's not 100% sure about it, when it comes to your data, I tend to want to err on the side of caution. Also, I would wager that, if he has a small SSD, he hasn't mentioned the size.
Right.
If it's stuff you want cached, you should probably have it on the SSD anyway. And so the caching on the hard drive would probably be less effective. You would see less benefit from it. If you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
No, I don't have any other thoughts. I don't know, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you're running Windows 7 or Windows 8, and you have a large amount of system RAM, the operating system is going to automatically cache some of your most used information or the applications inside system RAM. If you have an Intel motherboard that supports an MSSD, you can kind of configure it that way. But I haven't seen anything where you can kind of roll your own. Rotating media drive to your solid state drive. I haven't seen any software that will do that, but if you have, email us, twich, TWICH at twit.tv. At this point, though, you kind of really need to have – this needs to be done kind of in the operating system level or at the hard drive level or at the factory. You're not really going to create your own SSD cache unless the operating – yeah, if the operating system's not doing it, you're probably not going to make it happen at this point.
Right. Yeah. The Intel SRT stuff has to be done, I think, before you install the operating system. Right. Is that right? So it's like when you get into the operating system, it says hit F6 for the driver, like that old classic issue. You can install the driver that way, and you basically are creating a RAID array before you install the OS.
There you have it. One of our classic questions, Adam, has a question about with going SLI or a single new card and power supply unit. Says it needs some advice. I built my first gaming PC last year. I've been extremely happy with the build and been able to play everything with max settings in 1920 by 1080 resolution with the GTX 480. I've been in the market for a new monitor, and today I decided to go crazy and I ordered one of the Korean Cat Leap monitors. Yes! Although the GTX 480 is still one of the most powerful cards out there and rips through 95% of the games I play at a solid 60 frames per second, the 2560 by 1440 resolution of the new monitor may prove to be too much for it to handle. So here's my dilemma. Do I fork over the $400, $500 for a new GPU like a GTX 670 or 680? Or do I buy a second GTX 480 for under $200 to run an SLI? The second option is obviously more attractive because of the price, but the big problem is, will my power supply be able to handle two of the most power-hungry cards out there? It's an 80-plus gold, but only 650 watts. I need help from the experts. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. So,
he pretty much answered his own question. And if you look at if you go to NVIDIA.com and you look up the GTX 480, you'll see that the GPU itself has not a 600-watt TDP, but it has a 600-watt power supply recommendation for a single graphics card.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't need a 1200-watt for two, but you probably want an 800, an 850, something like that for two of them. So your option is to buy a new power supply along with your new 480. I would say to buy an 800, 900-watt power supply and a new video card, you're going to pay as much as you would for a 670. Anyway, and the 670 is going to be a better experience. You don't have to – if you get a 670 or 680, you don't have to use SLI. I like SLI, but if you don't have to use it, all the better. Right. And it's going to be more efficient. It's going to be quieter. It's going to be cooler than a pair of 480s. Trust me, a pair of 480s is about as bad as it gets in terms of heat and noise in the last 5-6 years of video cards. So
there you have it. Get the single, bite the bullet, spend the money, get the single card, keep your existing power supply.
Yep.
So are you over Windows 8? Is there going to be any more Windows 8 related coverage coming on PC this week?
Yeah, of course. I think tomorrow we're going to actually do a live stream of a system build and then install Windows 8 on it and kind of go through the Windows 8 as a desktop computer environment. Sometime tomorrow afternoon, we'll figure that out here and we'll post it on the site. Obviously, I have a full review of the Vivo Tab to go over. We have one of the Yogas. The Lenovo Yoga is on its way here as well. I have a feeling it's going to be a very Windows 8 heavy quarter, to say the least, right? Because every notebook vendor is going to have all these refreshes that they want to talk about. I mean, look at what Asus announced on, was it Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday. They announced the Vivo Tab, the Vivo Book, the TaiChi, and new Ultrabooks with Windows 8. And that's part of one company's product stack. And then I think I got a press release from Dell that had 11 products listed.
That's pretty crazy. It's been interesting, like meeting with the vendors. Lloyd Case is going to be joining us next week on TechZilla with a big old pile of laptops and tablets to kind of give us the 10,000-foot view of everything that came out this week. I reviewed some of Logitech's new mice and trackpads on TechZilla on our Windows 8 episode that released this morning. It's going to be interesting. I expect from early results suggest I will get a whole bunch more questions about tools you can use to configure Windows 8 to bring back the start button. Classic Shell's really amazing. It's open source. It's free if you haven't seen it. And there'll be a lot of that coming up in the next week. That, and I have a funny feeling I'm going to be doing a lot of Linux coverage for my own personal amusement and sanity. I actually like Windows 8, but
I do. To be honest, this Vivo Tab is kind of my first real experience with using it on a touch-enabled device, and
it's a totally different world. Yeah,
it's not bad. I will admit it's very jarring going to the desktop environment sometimes when you open up Microsoft Word or something like that. It just seems very unnecessary. In a format where you're not I'm not going to be able to run my x86 application, so why even bother showing me the environment that lets me think about the old way? I guess I totally get it on desktop. Yeah.
I mean, it's also it's really frustrating because there's I'd like to be able to run certain UI formerly known as Metro apps in Windows on the desktop. In the desktop environment, because it's enormously difficult for me to go from giant frame of information to switch giant frame of information when I'm working in multiple applications. But it's interesting. There's certainly a learning curve, and once you kind of get over that, people seem to be really enjoying Windows 8. And for $40, it's a really tempting upgrade for Windows.
Yeah, I guess I don't own any copies of Windows 8 legally. Yes. Well, we have our TechNet subscriptions, right? So, but I try to not use those on my own personal stuff. So I might go to Best Buy tomorrow and see what that whole retail experience is like.
If you've got XP or Vista or 7, you can upgrade online to Windows 8 Pro for $40. If you want to get, and I highly recommend if you are building a new system and you want to get a copy of Windows 8, you find at a flea market or something an old copy of XP or Vista, because the full installers. Yeah, it's a valid license because the full installers version of, I want to say it's like $80 or $100 for the installers version on Amazon. Amazon also has some excellent $30 off codes because the Windows 8 Pro upgrade is $40 online. It's like $70 if you want the DVD shipped to your house. You can get $30 off the DVD at Amazon. I think Amazon's still running. Let me check that really quickly. As of what day is today? Thursday.
They had $69 plus a $30 gift card or something like that, didn't they?
Like an instant discount on it.
Yeah, it was like an Amazon gift card. I don't know, but it was a good deal, and I thought But now as I think about tomorrow, I was like
Yeah, basically, so through October 27th, through Saturday, purchase select Windows 8 software and get a $30 Amazon.com promotional credit towards the purchase of items shipped and sold by Amazon.com. And that applies to the Microsoft Windows 8 Pro Pack and the Microsoft Windows 8 Microsoft software. And then the System Builder 64 bits. Yeah, it actually good. It'll also, the System Builder software, you get $30 off. So I'll take it from $100 down to $70. So Amazon rocking the fat discounts if you're looking for a physical copy of Windows 8. So
cool.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
See you next week on Twitch.